Thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held via video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. You are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask your name, item number you wish to address, and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair or committee polls for interested parties, press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested party and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring notice of the decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November 22, Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights for members of the public. No appeal is received within the prescribed time frame. The decision of the committee becomes final and binding. Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in the hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and all other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. I see we have regrets from Ms. McHale this evening. I believe Ms. McKnight, you wanted to address the committee before we get started?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to advise committee members that there will be an additional staff member joining for discussion of the final item on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, any declaration of pecuniary interest tonight? I see none. Madam Secretary-Treasurer, do we have any requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications?
Mr. Chair, I'm promoting person Louise Young. Hello. Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Louis Young. I'm presenting 2441 Hickson Street. The application number is CAV A050-2024. So we received the staff comments and decided to request a referral for the application so we can give the opportunity to address their concern.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, Mr. Hardcastle.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having a hard time hearing both the committee staff as well as Ms. Yang. I didn't hear what site we were dealing with here.
Okay, I could hear Ms. Yang. I can't hear staff either. It was a request to defer Hickson, CAV 050.
Yes, A050-2024.
You want time to have discussions with staff?
Yes, so I was also wondering if we can get the opportunity to speak to the planner so we can get some guidance for the revision.
Okay, but if the committee defers your application, then you should contact the Secretary Treasurer.
Okay.
Committee members, all those in favor of the deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Madam Secretary Treasurer, are there any other requests for deferral?
I don't see anybody else requesting deferrals.
We still can't hear you.
I don't see anybody else requesting deferrals.
Okay, we can hear you now. No consent applications. We'll move on to CAV A045 at 2025 Bridge Road. And we have one letter of objection from a John Goiter on this file. Good evening. Is the applicant here?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Arlene Beaumont is agent for this application.
Okay, I see her on the screen now. Good evening, Ms. Beaumont. You're muted still.
I think I know how to use this by now. Apologies. Arlene Beaumont, Outred and Associates. We are the agents for the owners of 2025 Bridge Road here this evening to ask for one minor variance for residential floor area of 43.47%, whereas 41% is permitted. Oh, my little presentation is up. Thank you. Could we go to slide number 2, please? So this is just a picture that was taken in June of 2023. The subject property is on the left-hand side. It's a split-level home, existing split-level home that is proposed to be demolished to make way for a new dwelling. I did want to show you that there is a new home on the right-hand side that is currently under construction, a newer home, 2-story height, looks to be a fair size. Next slide, please. So this is a picture that was taken earlier. Again, the subject property is on the right in this photo, and there's an existing property on the left that is, again, a 2-story home. It looks to be sort of original to the neighborhood, but it is definitely a larger 2-story home. Next slide, please. This is a new build that's located across the street. It just gives you an indication of the new construction that's sort of replacing the existing, the older homes in the neighborhood. So this is very indicative of the kind of new homes that are being built, mostly 2-story dwellings. Next slide, please. Here is the proposed front elevation for the new home at 2025 Bridge Road. As you can see, the roof has been broken up into some smaller elements. to sort of take away from the appearance of massing. The second story over the garage is set back about 2 feet from the front of the garage. And there are some articulations in the footprint to sort of reduce the appearance of massing and to break up the front facade. Next slide, please. This is the rear of the dwelling. Just wanted to show you what the rear neighbors would be seeing. Again, you have the roof lines broken up a little bit, and there are some articulations in the footprint of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So RFA is the only variance. We don't have a coverage or height variance. The proposed home at 2025 Bridge Road is in keeping with other new builds in the neighborhood. The homes are on either side are two stories, so it's, you know, a 2-story home in the middle would be fine. It looks consistent. The front and rear elevations incorporate design elements such as setbacks and articulations in the footprint that are going to break up the appearance of scale and massing. There will be mature landscaping at the front. I'll just explain. There is one large tree at the front of the property that will have to be taken down. That is the tree sort of on the right-hand side. The tree on the left-hand side will be retained. So the owners are trying to retain as much mature landscaping as they can. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. If anyone wants to speak to this application, if you can call 905-815-6095. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a bee in my bonnet about not indicating what the square meter size of the house is. You just made a presentation, you did indicate it. You may or may not be aware that the town no longer puts the size of the house on the notice of variance. I wanted to point out to you, the neighbors won't know how big the house is. And when you look at your building permit, building plans, you'd think a neighbor would be looking for the word residential floor area. But your building plans don't use those words. You use the words RFA. I Googled RFA. There's nothing tells me about what RFA is. GFA, sure, it's good. You get an answer on Google. So I'm just advising you in the future, this is got my being my bonnet about this. In the future, I would like, I can say that, for you to make sure that it's clearly indicated for the sake of the neighbors of the size of the house. Thank you.
We'll be sure to do that.
Mr. Dickey, any other questions for the applicant? None. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There are no phone calls at this time.
Okay, Ms. Beaumont, you've seen the letter of objection. Did you want to comment?
I'll just comment. I understand the neighbor's concern. However, as the committee knows, there's 4 tests to a minor variance, and the town's declaration of a climate emergency isn't one of the things that we would look at unless it is somehow incorporated into the zoning bylaw and the official plan.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other discussion, we'll close any further discussion and look for a motion. Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on my review of the owner's application, the site plans and building elevations together with my site visit and the presentation by the owner's consultant and the planning staff's report, I am satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application applied for be approved subject to the conditions that 2-story detached dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated January 31st, 2024, and the elevation drawings dated January 23rd, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of position. The building permit does not be issued for the proposed extension.
Yes. I think I froze there for a second. All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Move now to CAB A046, 1260 Cleaver Drive. We have 7 letters of objections from Chris Moeller, Matthew Sandbrook, Potter, Frank Appa, Lisa Bolton, Nancy Mooney, and Ang Bai.
Mr. Chair, I don't see the agent, however, who, yeah, oh, now I see somebody raise a hand. Just a second.
Good evening, sir. Can you get your name and address, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow committee members. My name is Shane Edwards from Hughes Design Studio, located at 1A Conestoga Drive, Brampton, Ontario.
You can proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're the applicants representing the owners of 1260 Cleaver Drive, which is application number CAV 046-2024, and I'll be speaking to the application this evening. This application is rather straightforward, so I'll just briefly run through the variances that we're requesting. First, before I begin, I'd like to address the increased height variance of 9.78 meters over the permitted 9 meters, as was originally included in this application. After reviewing the staff report, we noted that staff was in objection to this proposed height variance. We also understand that there were several letters of opposition received from neighbors also sharing their agreement with this objection. Based on these objections from both planning staff and the surrounding neighborhood, we would like to remove this height variance entirely. We've made a revision to the design. If you could please pull up page number 5 of the presentation. Yes, thank you. So this, we did make an amendment to the design where we have lowered the peak of the roof. So the dwelling is now 8.99 meters in height and complies with the 9-meter maximum bylaw. So we revised the design so we could clear up these objections, and we want the proposed dwelling to be sympathetic to the surrounding neighborhood. With that being said, again, we would like to remove this height variance from the application as we now comply, and would only like to move forward with the dwelling depth and garage area variances. To proceed, from bylaw section 5.86C, for lots located in the RL1 zone, the maximum total floor area for private garages shall be 56 square meters. We're proposing a total garage floor area of 62.69 square meters, which is a 6.69 square meter overage. We want to point out that this as can be seen from this front elevation, the garage appears to be a standard 2-car garage with 2 garage doors. The overage in area is as a result of the internal length being increased for 1/2 of the garage, and the extra length will allow for increased internal garage storage. This was designed in a way so that it was inconspicuous from the street and would not be apparent from the exterior of the dwelling. And third, as per bylaw section 6.3.1 for the RL1 zone, the maximum dwelling depth shall be 20 meters. We're proposing a total dwelling depth of 21.19 meters, which is a 1.19 meter overage. To quickly point out, the dwelling depth of 21.19 meters has been measured from the front of the covered porch to the rear columns of the covered rear terrace. The rear terrace is not enclosed, but it is excavated below, which is why we included this in the calculation for depth. The actual dwelling depth from front main wall to rear main wall is 16.6 meters, which does comply with the bylaw. but obviously we calculated based on the technicality of including that rear terrace. With that all being said, we do believe our application is minor in nature and meets the four tests of the Planning Act. We also note, as per the staff report, that there were no objections from staff to the dwelling depth and garage area variances. And again, we did make the revision to the design to eliminate the height variance that was objected. At this time, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions from yourself or the committee members.
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to have to ask the committee members and staff whether they're comfortable proceeding with this change on the fly. But before I do that, the staff, we've also raised concern with your driveway design conflicting with town trees.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we received engineering comments from one of our development engineers to town who had concerns about the proposed driveway location as it relates to the existing mature trees on the eastern portion of the property and the impacts to the root systems as well as their long-term longevity if the driveway were to be located in the position that it is to be placed in. There's no problems on development engineering's end for the driveway to remain in the current location it is for the existing dwelling. So I'm not sure if the applicant had a chance to review development engineering comments, which they were included at the end of planning's report. So they should have been able to review them quickly.
With the comments regarding the trees, is it staff's opinion that the site plan would also have to change?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It would, yes, yeah. The site plan drawing showing the driveway as it is currently would have to be changed in order to provide for the proper setbacks from the trees within the tree protection zones. And as of right now, the driveway still shows encroachment within those areas.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, you've heard from staff and the applicant for this application to proceed. It would require an official change to the elevations to deal with the height and change the site plan to configure the driveway in respect to the trees. And I'm going to ask whether you're comfortable proceeding on this basis, and if the committee were to approve, making the approval subject to revised drawings, site plan and elevations to the satisfaction of the Commissioner of Planning, or do you feel that there's enough change here that you're not comfortable dealing with this application tonight? Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some reservations, particularly in light of the number of people who have expressed concerns with respect to this proposal. I think it would be in the best interest of the process and to the residents if this matter were deferred to afford an opportunity for people to review and to potentially for the applicant to address the site plan issues as well. I think that is in the best interest. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any committee member have a differing view from Mr. Hardcastle's, which I too share. I think in light of the changes that need to be made and given an opportunity for the neighborhood to have a chance to revise, I think it's in the best interest of the applicant to seek a deferral on this. I don't see a dissenting view. Ms. Yu?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I have the same idea as the same opinion. The application should be deferred, though I'm not the person to ask them to defer, but I would encourage the applicant to seriously consider this. Am I frozen? Hello?
Thank you. Mr. Edwards, you've heard from the Seems like I keep freezing. Mr. Edwards, you've heard from the committee. It's your choice. You can seek a deferral or choose to move forward tonight. Although I believe you'll understand what the likely outcome would be if you choose to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, yes, we would be in agreement after hearing the opinions of the committee to agree with the deferral. If we could defer till the next hearing, that would be much appreciated, and it would give us a chance to review the site plan issue with staff and also an arborist, and also address any of the other issues of concern made by the public or staff.
Okay, thank you. I'll note, I think it's commendable that you're trying to address the issues, but it's difficult to address them on the fly the way you're trying to do and give everybody, staff and the residents, the opportunity to truly understand the changes. Committee members, all those in favor of deferring this application? Okay, that is unanimous. Your application's been deferred. You can contact Secretary Treasurer and she'll get you back on as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, have a good evening.
You too. Moving on to CAVA 047 at 128 Chisholm Street. I see Pat Solano on the screen now. Good evening.
Okay, there we are.
Can
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you get your name and address, please?
Okay, my name is Pat Solano. I live at 1024 Westville Road in Oakville.
Proceed.
Okay, this minor variance application is, I think, fairly straightforward. The single family home was converted to commercial use in around 1997 and remained as commercial use up until I purchased the property in November of 22. And all we want to do is reverse or change the use of the property back to what it always was, residential single family dwelling. That's the extent of it.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would staff be kind enough to put that site plan back up? I understand from the staff comments that this site plan does not reflect the existing site conditions on the site. I was wondering if the applicant could clarify that a little bit more and point out on this plan where things deviate from existing conditions.
Oh, what happened?
We can still hear you.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Could I ask Mr. Hardcastle, what exactly are you making reference to?
So in the staff comments, in the staff report, they advised that under a note at the end of the comments, they note that the site plan provided with the submission does not reflect the existing condition of the subject property. So I was looking for you to clarify what this represents then.
Okay, that site plan is taken from, I believe, a survey drawing from a land surveyor prepared some time ago. and the date will be in the title block. I can't see it right now. But what you have there is, I believe it's prepared in 2005. I can't see the date on it right now, but I think it's 2005. Sorry?
April 6, 2005.
Right, okay. And what that is, it's a local legal survey plan of the site. And if anything, it may have changed slightly since then. The only thing that's not shown is a wood deck in the backyard, at the rear of the house, off the kitchen. There's a rear deck there, a wood deck. That's all. The rest of it is basically there, I think. In that deck at the front there, on the extended portion of the house, where it's labeled, oh gosh, I can't read it. Covered veranda? Is that what it says? Frame veranda? That frame veranda is not there, and the steps aren't there either. They were taken out. They were taken out for reason of being able to park additional vehicles there. And that, I believe, all went through as part of the rezoning application that was put forth in 2005 by the original owner, or by the previous owner. In terms of the house structure itself, nothing has changed. It's as is.
And there will be no additional site alteration works, exterior site alteration works in order to accommodate the conversion?
No, there was none done at all. The exterior is left exactly as is right now on site. Nothing was changed. The only renovation work that I did was we installed a new kitchen, 2 new bathrooms, new flooring, and we painted the house on the interior. Oh, and we painted the exterior of the front door. That was it. The exterior has not been touched.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe with Mr. Hardcastle's comments, Mr. O'Hare, perhaps you could elaborate, as I'm reading the note in the staff report. I think staff are suggesting that because the applicant came in and asked for a single variance for the change of use, they didn't ask for any other variances in the review that was done. You perhaps uncovered what you think are some additional variances that may be required?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So in comparison to the survey that was done on April 6, 2005, there's been an additional parking pad that's been put in place. So it's a stone parking pad, not to a garage, but just over the public right of way into the front yard at the southern end of the property. So that driveway parking pad hasn't been indicated on the site plan, but that was constructed and built after 2005 as parking spaces for the office use that was existing prior. In terms of any additional variances that might be required, when zoning examining staff reviewed this application as it came in, there was nothing else, that came up during identification. Building services and zoning examiners also rely on applicants to come forward with the correct list of variances required, unless filing for a building permit when a full review is done to determine the list of variances. So we haven't had an opportunity to review if there are any additional variances required due to the additional hardscape driveway on the property. But as it's a 45-2 application, and there's no additional construction being proposed for the site, a building permit wouldn't be required in this case. So for you, Mr. Chair, if perhaps committee wanted to suggest a deferral and get the applicant to go through the proper building permit process to determine if there's any additional outstanding variance is required, you know, that would be fine by staff, but it was just kind of a commentary note to let the committee know that when this survey was done and the current condition of the site are different. You know, it didn't flag, we weren't concerned at all about the potential for an extra variance. It was more just kind of like a instruction note on your behalf. But it should committee wish a deferral for the opportunity to you know, have the applicant submit for building permit to determine any deficiencies. You know, I don't think staff would have a problem with that either.
But it sounds like staff have no concern with the variance being requested, and it's more of advice to the applicant that should he ever apply for a building permit or sell the property and a purchaser asks for a zoning compliance letter, at that time he may find out that he's not complying with certain performance standards and might have to come back for another variance at that time.
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hardcastle, does that discussion satisfy your questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You got to the second part before I did.
Always glad to help. Any other questions for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anybody called in to speak to this application?
There are no phone calls at this time.
Okay, we will close the discussion and I'll look for a motion on this matter. Mr. Dickey.
Mr. Chairman. Based on my review of the owner's application, the site plan, and my site visit, together with the presentation by the owner's development planning staff report, I'm satisfied that this is a variance, not a variance. So yeah, think about my wording. This provision. Oh, I guess we don't have to satisfy this for a test. Sorry.
No. You just need to satisfy yourself, Mr. Dickey,
Yes.
that it's not
I
more
make a motion.
expensive.
Sorry. I make a motion that this application be approved.
You're satisfied that it's similar to the previous existing uses and it's not more disruptive?
And the house, it appears to be physically it's a house. It's surrounded by residential uses, so it's compatible with the neighborhood and immediately adjacent.
Okay. Thank you. With no conditions. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? Your application is approved, sir. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
We'll now hear application CVA 048 at 212 Southview Road. See Mr. Karen. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good evening.
My name is Joris Kieran of Kieran Design in Oakville, located at 11 Bronte Road, Unit 31. I'm the agent for the applicants on this particular file. And just want to start out by saying that my firm was not involved in this original design of this house or the original permit application. And we were only retained by the owner after the variance or the discrepancy was noted. The variance being sought tonight is the RFA, residential floor area. And this first page is just pointing to the statistics table, which we always have, just to show what it is. 42.2% is being requested, and 39% is allowed. Next slide, please. This is just a drawing of the existing first floor plan as built. No changes, no extra area down here. This is all as per the approved plans. And slide 3, please. This is the area that has caused the overage. And it's now a spare room. It was shown on the permit drawings as unheated space, but it still had the walls around it. And I was kind of surprised when I saw this, because we obviously deal with the building department a lot, and when we have applications, and even if we have a small area of attic space that could be used as in the future as habitable space, it gets flagged, and it usually gets added to RFA right off the bat. So for some reason, this was approved with this unheated space shown on the drawing, but it wasn't counted. So I found that a bit strange. I'm not sure. Again, we were not involved in this application originally, and we didn't design this house, so I don't know what happened. But when I saw the drawings when we were handed the file, it just surprised me. So I could see how that could potentially be, cause for some, confusion to somebody that doesn't really know, what the rules are. Anyway, this is the area in question. This is what's causing the extra area to be added and putting it over what's permitted, and that's why we're here seeking this variance. Next slide, please. And then this is just the exterior, the front elevation, which has not changed at all. That gable over the garage and that window were always part of the original plan. It's just now there's a room behind it, whereas before there was not supposed to be a room, just this unheated space. So that's a bit of the background. That's the area that's putting us over. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kieran. If anyone wants to speak to this application, you can call 905-815-6095. Mr. Kieran, if I can start. I believe the rest of the committee, when looking at an application of this nature, doesn't look at it as what's the impact of approving an existing use, but has to turn the clock back and look at the entire application as if it was in front of the committee for a variance, as it should have been, and decide whether or not it meets the four tests of the Planning Act, not just that the getting caught with this variance has no effect, therefore there's no impact. So can you speak to this application with respect to, the way the town, the committee look at these variances, especially for increased floor area, looks for the applicant to be, trying to mitigate the impact of that additional space. And I think that's what, in my mind anyway, that's what I need to understand from this application, not just that you need the variance and there's no change to the building.
So, sorry, you want me to speak to how the floor area is?
Yeah. If this was coming to the committee for the first time,
I see.
How is this additional floor space and the design how does it meet the intent of the bylaw, and how is it desirable?
Right. Yeah. So if you could just maybe go back to my slide presentation, I'll approach it from that direction. So if you want to go back, actually, to the first slide. Yeah, I mean, so what I would say is we're compliant with lot coverage, we're under. So the footprint is compliant and is not impacted by this, RFA increase. If you go to the next slide, please. First floor also would be compliant, irregardless of this change. So there would be no change there. And then go to the third slide. So this is the area where, if this was coming in as an application, from scratch, then there would presumably be some reason why the client needed this. So either a 5th bedroom or some kind of other space, maybe a rec room or something. And so the purpose would be identified as such. I'm not sure what they're using it for. It appears to be, more of a bonus room space because it's not really functioning as an independent bedroom because it doesn't have direct access off the hallway. It's just an empty space right now. And if you go to the last slide, please. That gable, was going to be there even if that space wasn't used. If it wasn't going to be counted, we would put trusses in there, and then it would legitimately not be counted, and that would have been a dummy window. So I don't see the massing of the house really changing whether this RFA was there or not. So I think from an impact standpoint, there isn't really a change, so it's not a negative impact in that regard. My firm, we've obtained 2 variances on that street in the last 5 years approximately for additional RFA as well. So it's not the only house on the street that's in excess of the RFA permitted. The street hasn't seen an awful lot of development. I would say roughly a third of the street, maybe a quarter of the street has been redeveloped. So it's sort of in the early stages of the redevelopment process, but this is not the only one. And then also we do have, although planning staff objected to how this came about, and obviously it's not a good way to ask for these kind of things after the fact. Aside from that, they were supportive of the application otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kieran. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Mr. Dickey?
I don't necessarily have a question for the applicant, question for the town planner, you may?
Certainly.
So I agree with the chairman saying about if we were looking at this originally, what would we be looking at? And to the town planner, I'm asking, is the design and the front facade of the house acceptable under the, I believe it's called guidelines to development under the official plan, that type of thing? The house to me looks acceptable. I'm not the expert in that. I wanted the town planner to comment on that.
To you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Dickey, that is correct. Staff did analyze this application based on the 4 tests, which includes it meets the intent of the official plan, intent of the zoning bylaw, if it's desirable and minor in nature, as well as evaluated based on the design guidelines for stable residential communities. And our analysis was that this design includes single-story elements. The roof is lower down. The second story is integrated into the roof line, and they have some design elements that mitigate the impacts of massing. And that's how we came to the conclusion that the impacts are properly mitigated, and we didn't have any objections.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There are not phone calls at this time.
Okay, then I will close discussion and look for a motion on this matter. Ms. Yu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on my review of the application materials, together with the staff reports, having heard the presentation by the agent, in my opinion, this proposal meets the meets the four tests under Planning Act. As such, I'd like to move the motion forward to approve this proposal, subject to conditions. The two-story detached dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and the elevation drawings dated February 5th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to briefly state, I have some reservations with how this got to where it is today, and the process in which it's gone through. But based upon the evaluation and looking at this as a fresh development, if you will, I do agree with Mr. Kieran's comments with respect to consistency with the existing established neighborhood and the comments by the town planner with respect to conformity with the design guidelines. So I'll support the motion that's on the floor, notwithstanding my reservations about how it got to where it is today.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? Okay, that's 3 in favor. I'm going to vote against it. I'm not convinced I would have supported this application. I guess my reservations are a little stronger, Mr. Hardcastle. But regardless, your application is approved, sir. 3-1.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. I guess we'll see you back later.
I'll be back.
CAV A049 at 326 Sandalwood Road. We've got 9 letters of objection on this one.
Mr. Chair, I need to say something before you start this application. I would like the members to know that we were advised this afternoon by our IT department that there have been multiple issues since Friday with the towns receiving legitimate emails that were blocked as a spam. I'm mentioning this as several residents that had sent email with their objections before the deadline. However, the emails were not received due to this issue. I have now received those emails, and if the committee would like me to read them, for the record, I would do so. If not, I can read their name and addresses that were not received due to this issue dealing with the town. Thank you.
I think if you could maybe read then the entire list of letters of objection, just who they're from, and I think that'll be sufficient. And if residents have objection, they still have the opportunity to speak and express to the committee.
So the letters that we didn't receive on time because of the issue is from Kevin and Jeanette McAlpin, from residents of 327 Sandalwood Road. Then Ilya and Sumorna and Andrea Graham, residents of 339 Sandalwood Road. And also Liz and Murray White, residents of 355 Sandalwood Road. And if anybody else was not received, that was because of the issue with emails. Thank you.
And that's in addition to
the list stated on the And
That
send,
would
yeah, send with addendums to the comments.
That would be Mike and Sarah Desmero, Brian Collis and Jody Collis, Brian Lamont, Tracy Havis, Janet and Kevin McAlpine, Ken and Karen Arbottle, Amanda Duffy, Frank Parada, Robert Toon, Ian and Maureen Barber, all of Sandalwood Road.
Correct.
Thank you. And if any people who submitted an objection or anyone else that's watching that wishes to speak to this application, you can call at 905-815-6095. We'll proceed with the application. Mr. Malik, good evening, sir. Just need to unmute yourself.
Good evening. My name is Lawrence Malik. I'm the applicant on behalf of the owner for 326 Sandalwood Road. The proposed design of the house, we feel does meet the 4 points, and we do feel it is minor in nature. And we feel that the architectural treatment of the house with the materials that are also being proposed are compatible and basically in keeping with homes in the surrounding area. In light of the fact that there have been 4 variances that have been brought to our attention, we wanted to draw attention to the fact that after having further consultation with the owner, who had purchased this property a few years ago and has managed to start doing some maintenance on the grounds to clean up the yard areas. The intent, though, is to look to reposition the house, and we would obviously amend the site plan to suit to show that it would meet the side yard setbacks, respectively, for the east and the west side yard, to reduce that one minor variance. Secondly, the intent is to remove the rear covered porch, which would reduce the coverage from 25% allowable down to which currently exceeds that down to 24% to make it compliant. And the client is also looking to put in a reverse ledge foundation, which will allow us to reduce the overall building height from the established grade from what was intended to be on the drawings is 9 meters, but was determined from the surveyor to be 9.5. Sorry, it was what do I have here? It was from 9.5 meters down to 9.2 meters. So it would be a valid attempt to reduce the overall height so that it would just be 8 inches above the allowable. And with respect to that would basically be leaving one of the other variances being the increase of the GFA being 3% over the allowable. But in light of the fact that 3% doesn't really create a visual or obvious impact to the neighborhood, we didn't see that as being we see that being minor in nature. I also want to address the fact that there are other homes in the surrounding area that went up for committee of adjustments in the past that had increases in coverage floor area index of greater than 3.7 to 2.4% that have been approved. And we think that since it has been done in the past for other properties, we don't see why this should be any different or an exception in this case. So generally speaking, we feel that the 4 points are generally being met, and we don't see this as being a nuisance. There are some mature trees at the rear of the yard that do cast shadows, so we don't believe that the height of the house would be causing any greater shadow or shade conditions to neighboring properties, as would be the case with existing trees that would not be coming down. I have nothing further to add at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Malik, it sounds like from your presentation, you just proposed to amend almost your entire application, other than the variance for floor area, which staff also doesn't support. I guess I would have expected you to seek a deferral and speak to staff about these changes, but
if a deferral is what would be necessary, then we could certainly entertain that. It's just that I had discussed this with my client rather late to see if we could come up with some sort of compromise that we reduce the number of variances down. So this was an agreement that was discussed with my client in view of getting some of these recent comments that just came to our attention in the last day or two. We didn't get notices about the comments from the neighbors until recently, so it didn't give us enough time to prepare a revised presentation. We did what we could in light of the fact that we had a very short time to discuss this with the committee.
I'll refer back to an earlier application tonight of a similar nature, and the committee was not comfortable dealing with the revised information, and particularly in this case with the amount of resident opposition and the fact that in my opinion, the changes you're making still are not going to satisfy the staff. It is I would recommend you seek a deferral, but that's your choice. You can proceed or request a deferral at this time, although it probably should have been done earlier, but we'll give you that option. It's your choice, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to confer with my client for a second if that is to their acceptance. I'm just texting them.
Yeah, I see Mr. Hardcastle, you got a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, although I think it's been hinted around at with the large volume of resident inquiry, this is a beautiful opportunity for Mr. Malik and his clients to go out into the community and have an engagement with them. It strikes me that has not occurred at this point. And so with the deferral, not only is there an opportunity to work with staff, but there's an opportunity to engage with the people who are going to be neighbors to the folks who are looking to construct the building. So that would sort of be my comments on that.
So in view of just discussing this with my client, we wish to make a deferral. It is my client's intent to obviously want to be a good neighbor, and we want to obviously come up with a design that's going to be appealing and be compatible with the neighborhood. So we're not here we're here to be good citizens and do what we can to make sure that this proposed house is going to be a suitable and appropriate edifice for the in Oakville and for this community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Malik. Committee members, the applicant is now choosing to seek a deferral. All those in favor? All right, sir, your application has been deferred. I would hope you would heed Mr. Hardcastle's advice and not only speak with staff, but also speak with the neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. One in the audience, CAVA 050 at 2441 Hickson was deferred earlier tonight. That'll be heard in a future meeting. Here, CAVA 051 2024 at 79 Jones Street.
Mr. Chair, I do have somebody else as an agent. However, Ms. Kyla Wilson wants to speak in regards to I believe this application, but I'm not sure.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to the chair of our board at the Bronte Business Improvement Area to speak on this application.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Can we get your name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Cheryl Etherington. My address is 2360 Lakeshore Road West, Oakville.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Shabar, or Mel, as we all know him, is requesting a variance to permit his food truck to operate in one parking space, 79 Jones Street, which is a private parking lot owned by the Legion. He has the full support of the Legion. There are 60 parking spaces there, and his trailer is only parking in one space, and it's not interfering with any traffic in the parking lot. Prior to this, Mel owned a restaurant in Bronte on Lakeshore Road, Zaras, for over 15 years, and he opened up his food truck last year with the support of the Legion. The Legion no longer has a full kitchen because they can't get the volunteers to operate it. So his food truck supplies food for the Legion. It is strictly takeout. There are no picnic tables. There's no chairs around there other than for the patio that the Legion has for their members. He's a big supporter of Bronte. Excuse me. In November, he supplied 700 hot dogs, 300 hot dogs for the cadets for Remembrance Day. And he served over 1,500 free bowls of soup this winter. And he donates food to the homeless here. He has the support of 124 signatures from people in the area, the full support of the Legion, and has the support of Doug Greco, the owner of Catch Hospitality, who runs the fire hall, which is in 500 yards of his food truck.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I will note that the committee is in receipt of the rather impressive 124 name petition in support of this application. If there's anyone that wishes to speak to this application, you can call now at 905-815-6095. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, do you have 124 phone calls in support?
Mr. Chair, there is no phone calls at this time. We received already.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's probably a new record. With no further questions, no input from the public other than what's been received, I'll close the discussion and I'll look to the committee for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great opportunity to contribute to our community down in Bronte. The services that have been provided by the owner of the food truck are known to myself and my family, and you know, the word gets around even though I don't live down in Bronte. I think this is a great contribution to sport, and I'll put forward a motion of approval here, subject to the conditions that are noted by staff, those being that the one food truck is permitted on the subject property, that the food truck occupies a maximum of one parking space in general accordance with the site plan to the satisfaction of the director, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a business permit is not, business license has not been issued for the food truck operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on that motion? I see none. All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Congratulations, your application has been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
If only all our applicants look so happy with our decision. Thank you. Have a good evening. your CAV A001 2024 at 17 Rain Avenue. See Mr. Dom on the call. Good evening.
Yes, my name is Jodo, 133 Torresdale Avenue, agent for the owner. The owners would like to build a new two-story dwelling on a corner lot to accommodate their family needs. At the previous hearing in January, we requested deferral to satisfy planning staff comments. The drawings before you today reflect revisions in accordance with planning recommendations, and they no longer have concerns. The FAR was reduced from 43.8% to 42.66%, which includes pulling back the dwelling on the flankage yard to increase the setback to 3.28 meters. And importantly, the owners and architect worked hard to make design changes to reduce the visual massing on the flankage yard side by sloping the roof and significantly lowering the side main wall and windows, as can be seen on the west exterior side elevation, Z03.4. If you're able to bring up the side elevation. Z03.4. That's right. This helps to create a more gradual transition between neighboring dwellings and has a visual appearance of a one-story dwelling along that flankage yard. And as a point of comparison, down the street at 99 Rain Avenue, this was approved for a similar FAR and does not include the kind of massing mitigation elements provided with the revised proposal today. The front, rear, interior side yard setbacks meet the bylaw. The lot coverage is 2.31% below the bylaw. The dwelling length is 16.3 meters, and no height variance is requested. And to our understanding, there are no neighbors in opposition. And overall, we feel the application as revised is reasonable and minor in nature, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. If anyone wishes to speak to the application, please call 905-815-6095. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? I see none. I'll just add, Mr. Don, I think you've done an excellent job of addressing the concerns that were raised initially. Thank you for that. Madam Secretary Treasurer, any members of the public wishing to speak to the application?
There are no phone calls at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll close discussion and have a motion on this matter. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, having heard the presentation from the applicant, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the four tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval. Likewise to the chairman, I believe that the modifications have addressed the concerns and go a long way towards addressing any potential impacts from the variances. The motion would be subject to two conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated February 8th, 2024, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present or correspondence received with respect to the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too.
Final application of the night, CAV A152 2023 at 510 Wellington Crescent. We do have a letter of objection from Medita and Darius Grifones at 1097 Bridge Road. Mr. Kieran, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening once again, members of the committee and Mr. Chair. So I'm Joris Kieran. I'm the agent for the applicants. and I'll do a short presentation on this file, which was deferred from the November 1st hearing. At that time, it was deferred because really for the same reason that we're dealing with now, which is the grading concern, drainage, and there's a bit of a flood risk to this particular property, which has been raised by planning staff, which we are aware of, and we're in the process of addressing. Staff had indicated, just to clarify here, that the variance that we're seeking is for RFA. It's pretty clear from my discussions with planning staff that they don't really have a concern with the RFA here or the design of the house. It's really just the impact as it relates to the flooding concern, and which stems from a remnant channel that's at the rear of the property. It's not very clearly visible on this site plan, but it really runs along the back of the property, and it runs along, 30 or 40 properties along that stretch of the street. So that's where it is. So we're aware of that. What I'm speaking to today is mainly that concern. The RFA I'll just quickly show in a later slide on where that is, and I think that's secondary, but I'm happy to discuss that as well. But it's really this flooding concern. Between the time we got deferred in November and now, I just want to point out that we have also gotten approval for the house next door, which is also shown on this site plan. It's 506. And the reason that that's very relevant is that that property has the exact same remnant channel behind it, as well as the flooding concerns that this property has, a subject property. We were able to address those concerns through the building department, building review, building permit review process, and that has actually been approved. The house is pretty much identical in size because the lot is slightly larger. We did not require variances for that house. So it's similar in size, exact same flood condition. We were able to get it, approved through the grading review, and all that was taken care of. It was scrutinized, and we had to go a few rounds, but it was all dealt with. So we feel it's likely that we're going to be able to apply the same solution to the lot next door. And what we're just asking here is that, this venue to deal with these grading issues is really not here at the Committee of Adjustment. We feel it should be with Development Engineering. That's where we resolved the other one. So although the concerns raised by staff are relevant, dealing with them through the committee process will cause substantial delays to my client beyond the 4 months that are already associated with the original deferral. So the main objective is really to avoid having to go around again. If this gets denied, it means we have to then reapply for a variance while we're talking to the Development Engineering Department, which is really kind of out of order, right? Like normally the way we do it is we design the house, we identify variances, and then we apply for a committee of adjustment, through the process of the committee of adjustment and get those approved. And then we apply for the building permits. All those technical issues like grading and trees and all that are dealt with in that third step at the building permit approval stage. And, that's kind of how it's done. What's happening in this case is that planning staff is kind of pulling that issue into this process, which I understand why they're raising it, because it is a concern, but because it naturally belongs in Development Engineering's camp, and we've already dealt with the exact same issue next door, we're just asking that the committee approve this with a condition saying that, okay, it's conditional on Development Engineering approving this and getting a site alteration permit, which is what we intend to do. It's what we did for the house next door. So we're going to do that here. So I think the protection and the reassurance to planning staff to address this concern is already built into the process. But, we're saying put it as a condition of this variance as well. Then we can get this process out of the way, move on to the permit stage, get the higher level drawings done, which aren't even done yet. because we're not at that stage, the the grading plans and all that stuff. So we're just basically asking for that to add to have it approved and add the development engineering approval as a condition, so that we can both address planning's concern and also have my client be able to move on and not cause further delay. So what I'll do, that's addressing the flood concern, but I'll just briefly speak to the RFA variance if you want to go to slide 2, please. So this is just the areas identified that are contributing to the overage. So we have a small mudroom area at the front, then we have a study in the back there. And if you go to the second slide, we have a laundry room on the second floor as well. That pretty much adds up to the overage. Slide 4. That's the front elevation of the house. Yeah, and that's that concludes my presentations. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kieran. We do have development engineering staff here. Well, I'm sure we'll speak to this. I guess I had a similar reaction to the staff comments as you. If you were seeking a coverage variance, I would think the staff comments would be more relevant, but in this case, you're only seeking GFA variance. If you were not seeking a variance here, I think I heard you say, like the property next door, you would be in a position to get a building permit, and provided you satisfied the requirements of a site alteration permit to deal with the flooding issue. Is that your opinion, that a building permit is available to you and it's once you satisfy the site alt process?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we think we can satisfy those concerns through development engineering, through the site alteration process, as we did for the house next door, because we've already engaged the same civil engineer that did the house next door and that got it across the finish line, and he's already done the one for next door. And it may need some tweaking, but that's expected, and we're prepared to do that. But yeah, absolutely. If there was no variance required here, we would already be well into that process and sorting that out.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Mr. Hardcastle.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm going to hold my questions until after we talk to the development engineering staff, actually.
Okay, Ms. McKnight, I don't see development engineering staff on my screen, but hopefully they're here and can speak to Mr. Kieran's presentation.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe development engineering staff are just joining via phone right now. So I see the town development engineer manager has just hopped on here.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair. Apologies, I'm joining from my car. I was at home until about 5 minutes ago, and I did have to drop my son. So now you're getting me live from my car, but I have pulled over. So through you, Mr. Chair, the previous application didn't go through a committee of adjustment, so there wasn't the development engineering review of that. And then it went through a building application, which is a different department. We did not touch that application. We do have a master plan, a stormwater master plan that provides guidance. And we don't have sufficient information provided to demonstrate that there is a feasible method of safely developing to provide safe access and egress to this home. It is quite significant based on our high-level mapping from the master plan for this remnant channel, the extent of the flood line on this property, not only from the remnant channel that Mr. Kieran spoke about, but also from, there's drainage from the north along Wellington and Weir, as well as up through Pine Grove, and it picks up when the heavier rains. Actually, the drainage does come down through here from Spears Road. So there is quite a large drainage area that comes down to this area, and it's quite flat. And there are concerns that the area is quite inundated during a heavy rainfall. We do have, as part of our comments, a map of that remnant channel. I'm not sure if it's worthy of pulling it up.
It's coming. Just a second, please.
Huh? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I turned the car on because I lost my light. But while they're pulling that up, so from the information provided, staff's professional opinion is that there's not enough information to know if you could, you know, build to the as of right, let alone beyond the as of right that we're considering here. So that's the hesitation from granting the variance, as it infers that there is an ability to work this out through site plan. We wouldn't have a condition tied to site plan because of the type of variance here. But having a condition would imply that you can resolve through that, and we're not confident that we can. So that is why we are looking for more information to be demonstrated. That the cross sections that would demonstrate not just the existing limits of flooding, but the proposed limits of flooding would need to be demonstrated for the property, and that it would not, in accordance with the building code, not impact adjacent properties negatively. So there's a couple things. There's the impacting the adjacent properties, and there's having safe access and egress to this dwelling. Can you see the drawing?
No,
Okay.
I can see it on the screen in town hall council chambers, but not
Okay.
and my eyesight's not that good. Oh, here it comes.
Oh, there it is. So the red line depicts the extent of flooding during the 100-year. So when we have what they call a 1 in 100-year rain event, which is a large rain event, and that's what we typically base our limits of development on in the past. Now we actually look at the regional event, but this is the 100-year limit. The red line shows the extent, and if you can zoom in on the property or point to the property, you can see that there's a blue line that comes along the west side of the property, and that entire property is actually within the red bubble, right? The bubble enclosed by the red line, which is the floodplain enclosed for the 100-year. So there are concerns from a cut fill balance, if you would be able to do enough of a cut fill balance in that backyard to not impact adjacent properties and to provide safe access and egress. And there's not enough information to know where the actual floodline limit would be under proposed conditions, because the cross section wasn't provided for proposed conditions. And sorry, and the other piece would be that the modeling provided by the engineer didn't include that drainage that comes from Spears Road. So the flows that they've quantified will actually go up. So there is a bit of work to be done to see if it's even feasible.
As far, can I ask, it appears the adjacent property is in the exact same position. How was it able to get a building permit?
As I noted earlier, it went through a different process because it didn't come in for a committee of adjustment, and with Bill 23, these would have been DESPs in the past. Now through Bill 97, we have site plan back adjacent to these remnant channels, so this could be subject to a site plan. But when the other one first came in, that process, the change hadn't happened yet, so it went straight to building permit and had a different review. They did. Now that said, they provided a stormwater management report, which other staff have reviewed, and there was more information provided on proposed conditions and cut fill balance but it followed a different process. So we don't have all the information through this process to fully understand if they can not impact adjacent properties.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on your last points. So through some legislative changes, and the timing of that application, the adjacent property, it went through a less rigorous process than is required of this site. Is that understanding accurate?
It went through a different process. It was reviewed, and it did have, because it didn't go through the C of A, it went for a building permit, and then they were required to provide a stormwater report, and that had additional details that we don't have for this property.
Okay, so there's information that's missing right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And incorrect information. It's missing some of the drainage from Spears Road.
Okay. Would the size of this building being proposed affect technical solutions that may be available to the homeowner in order to remedy the situation? I'm trying to understand the applicability and the appropriateness of dealing with the engineering process ahead of the committee process here.
So with respect to the variance, the subject variance?
Yeah, they're proposing a larger dwelling than would otherwise be permitted.
So certainly increasing the hardened surface and expanding the footprint, or perhaps narrowing that gap between the homes where the water would flow may be an issue.
Now, historically, I know when conservation authorities have been involved with dealing with flood mitigation, there's two elements to what they were looking at. Was one being sort of human health risks, the access and egress point that you'd raised previously, and then the other one had been sort of property damage impacts and liabilities associated with that. Is that a concern for the town in their evaluations, much like it would be with the conservation authorities?
It would be similar in that the town's role is to sort of minimize risk and protect life and property. Yes. So this channel was regulated by the conservation authorities at one point, and some time ago, some of these remnant channels that really were channels realigned to support development back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. They don't regulate some of them anymore, where they've been disconnected from more of the creeks that have fish habitat and whatnot. So it's not regulated by the authority anymore, but the town did look at them through our master plan for this very reason.
Thank you.
Mr. Dickey.
Mr. Chairman. I'm having trouble with it. We were to approve this variance. Can the engineering department still not issue a building permit because of all these concerns? What's to stop the engineering department from? Why do we have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you mean the building permit issue a building permit?
We were to approve this variance.
Yes.
And I could be wrong. Then the owner will go and apply for a building.
Yes.
And at that point in time, can the engineering department not then say no if they don't like it?
Through that building permit process, there's a cursory review, and then it's decided if a site alt is required for the works outside of the building footprint, or if a site plan is required if it's under the new Bill 97 regulations. So depending on the timing it comes in, we'll dictate that. We're just transitioning.
You will have the ability to say no, correct?
The building permit would, or the building department would.
Because possibly because of the storm water issue.
Well, applicable law is not impacting adjacent properties negatively, yes.
So if we say yes, you can still say no. Right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the building department can always deny a building permit if it doesn't meet the applicable code requirements.
Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. Parker, if maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but my experience dealing with your department results in a far more vigorous review than dealing with just a building department. But if the committee were to deny the application and Mr. Kieran client decided to comply, that all they have to do is apply for a building permit, and sounds like it would get a less vigorous review than if we approve the variance and it goes forward on that basis. But it just seems to me that because of process, not anything tangible, if you don't need a variance, you can get a building permit and it's determined safe, you could build a house on the property. But because they're going through the variance process, it sounds like the town's saying it's not safe to build a house on this property. I'm struggling with the rationale here. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess supporting the variance in itself would be supporting that the development can occur. When we've looked at the information that we have provided through this variance, development engineering staff's professional opinion is that we don't have the sufficient information to support that. And there are concerns based on the high level information that we have.
Okay, and Mr. Kieran, I see you have your hand up, but let me just see if there's any other committee questions first. I don't see any. Mr. Kieran?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So just to, kind of address some of the things that were just said. So Mr. Dickey asked the question, I think a very good question about can they still deny the building permit? And it's gotten, so the answer, my understanding is they absolutely can deny the building permit because, and it's gotten a little confusing because at the time that the house next door was done, as Ms. Parker was saying, the site alteration permit process was temporarily suspended. So we went through the building department, but they did a pretty thorough grading review because we went 3 rounds and it looked like the comments were coming from somebody other than the building department because they were very thorough and similar comments we get from development engineering. So it wasn't, just rubber stamped. It went through multiple reviews. Now, we've been told by development engineering staff that going forward and all applications starting from, I think, 3 months ago, will all require development engineering review and site alteration permit. And all the permits we have in right now have that. The one next door just fell in that small window where it wasn't required. So we will definitely be applying for and requiring site alteration permit. So it will go through the development engineering permit process. All the technical things that Ms. Parker mentioned, I don't have anything to say against it because that's not my profession. I'm not an expert in that. And I would let my civil engineer deal with that and address all those comments. And they're probably all relevant and, but I think managed. So again, my point is that this is not the appropriate venue to deal with these technical matters. Let's move them over where they belong. And the last thing I'm going to say is I don't agree with what she's saying about that approval of this variance would somehow imply that it's a developed property. It isn't because the condition will be there for that specific reason. If we can't satisfy development engineering and get that site alteration permit, we don't have a permit, and that's on us. I mean, we're not. That's the whole, I think, reason and logical order of this process. So, again, we just want that opportunity to go down that road, and we don't feel it's appropriate to deal with that here.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any further questions for staff or the applicant, Mr. Dickey?
Just, rephrase my other way of asking my question to the engineer. If we were to deny this application, what are the owner's options? He either walks away, leaves the house as it is, or he complies with the zoning bylaw. That's the real thing. So he comes back and complies with the zoning bylaw. Doesn't he have to go through the same process, and the engineering department will have the same degree of being able to deny or approve? I don't see what the difference is. So if he comes back with complying with the zoning bylaw, what's different relative to the engineering department? Approval or disapproval?
Mr. Chair, was that question for me?
Sorry, yeah. I didn't know your name, so
sorry. I don't know. It said Riley McKnight earlier. I changed it, but it might have deferred back to Riley. So I'm Christina Barker. My apologies. So if they came back, so if they walked away from the variance, or if they came back for the variance?
No. We deny it, and then they come back and say, okay, I'm going to build a house that complies with the building. I'm sorry, complies with the zone. Doesn't need a committee of adjustment. What does the engineering department do then?
So through you, Mr. Chair, they would apply to the building permit. It would trigger the cursory review. And as Mr. Kieran said, most of them are going through site alts. In this case, we might have the ability to do the site plan. It's just transitioning back in through Bill 97 for areas adjacent to remnant channels. Either way, it would have a review by development engineering staff through that process.
And they could refuse
it. So the site plan is applicable law, and can hold up a building permit. The site alt is not applicable law, and it runs in parallel. That said, the building code does require that you don't impact adjacent property. So I would think in order to satisfy that requirement through building, they wouldn't sign off until that was done.
Thank you.
Ms. McKnight, you have your hand up?
No. Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah, sorry, I did lower my hand, but I will add a little bit of commentary on this as well. Going through the committee of adjustment process does allow for us to review an application in a different way from the building permit, and does allow for commentary on further protection of a property to some extent, and allows for us to comment on whether the application is desirable for the appropriate development of the subject lands. And so when the application seeks development to expand past the permissions the town has deemed appropriate as implemented through the zoning bylaw, and a minor variance is requested, that allows for a review of a proposal as a whole. So although the minor variance itself might be speaking specifically to the residential floor area ratio, the development proposed results in a larger building footprint beyond that of the existing home, which could result in increased impacts to both the subject property and adjacent properties, as floodwaters could be displaced further. And this is why staff, although feel as though the variance itself might meet the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan, we don't necessarily see it as desirable for the appropriate development of the subject plans, as it could pose substantial risk to the subject property and abutting properties, and as a result of health and safety risks. So I just want to bring it back to that minor variance piece and why planning staff have commented on this variance as not being desirable for the appropriate development of subject plans.
So Ms. McKnight, I guess where I'm struggling is, again, as I said earlier, it seems staff's concerns have got to do with coverage, and you're asking us to deny a floor area variance that staff don't seem to have any concerns with. So I'm struggling with denying a variance for a completely different issue than what the variance is requesting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the reason for staff's objection to the variance does fall on that piece of whether or not it is desirable. The development as a whole is desirable for the appropriate development of the subject lands.
Thank you. Ms. Yu?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would need the town staff to help me understand the process a little bit. Technically, if we approve this minor variance and they subject to our like standard conditions to get building permits and those conditions, if the applicant goes to the building department for the building permit applications with the precondition for the permit, that precondition is to subject to the development engineering review and to address the drainage issues. So in this stage, the applicant still needs to, the application still needs to be reviewed by the building department together with the engineering department. So is there still a good opportunity for the engineering department to deny the application because they cannot address the drainage issue and might get the substantial risks due to that development? That's just a hypothetical question.
So through you, Mr. Chair, through the building permit application, it could be denied through building because of the applicable law that I mentioned earlier with not impacting adjacent property, or it could be denied through a site plan review.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. I recall Ms. McNabb mentioned that the proposed residential floor area is bigger than the floor area of the existing building. So I don't see the drawing showing the existing footprint yet. I don't have that good memory. So I mean, if we overlay the footprint based on the requirements in the zoning bylaw on top of the existing building, would that be larger than the existing building's footprint?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to clarify, are you asking whether the proposed building footprint is larger than the existing building footprint, or if it exceeds the permissions through the zoning bylaw?
Sorry. If the permitted footprint under the zoning bylaw is bigger than the existing footprint of the building, existing building, is that which one is bigger, the permitted footprint or the existing footprint?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the footprint permitted through the zoning bylaw is larger than that existing on the property.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Hardcastle.
I have a couple of questions of the applicant at this point in time. Did I understand correctly that there have been engagements with with the engineering team and submission materials in order to address the this issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So for this specific property, we submitted the stormwater management report through the committee submission, committee of adjustment submission. So, but it was just sort of a one-way street because it was just submitted and then now here we are. So whereas with development engineering, like what we did with the house next door, well, it was through the building department, but you know, there's back and forth, right? Our engineer puts in their proposal and then there's comments and then we address those comments and then there's back and forth until we arrive at a satisfactory solution. So we have started that process. The engineer's been engaged and he did provide the report. but it is expected that there is going to be some back and forth, but there's no really opportunity to do that through this process because it's sort of just, we submit the application and then here we are. So, so it's been started, but you know, we're kind of, our hands are tied until we get to the step 3, which is the development engineering application.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to understand. Is there something that would prevent you from applying for and engaging in the development engineering process in advance of coming before the committee, especially in a situation like this where there may be concerns about your ability to address the requirements? Like, is there something preventing you from making that application at this point in time? You know, as we know, the committee of adjustment process has limited opportunity for back and forth dialogue as you move through the process. So, you know, it seems inappropriate to consider, you know, that you would in fact have an engagement point by submitting stormwater management through this process versus the development engineering process before getting here. I'm just, you know, we're talking about refusal and approval around this, and I'm trying to understand if we're just talking about an appropriate process timing in which you engage in the various parts of the process to get you towards a building permit. You know, sometimes there's information that's required in order to address the feasibility of an application or the appropriateness in the case of a minor variance before you get to the more fulsome review of the details of this specific variance in front of us.
Well, I mean, yeah, technically it's possible to do that. It you know, it would be highly unusual because it's not the customary order of things, right? We do the design, we do the variances, and then we apply for the building permit. So it's not really ever done that way. It's never done where we do the design and then skip ahead and submit a site alteration permit on its own, because it's usually submitted together with the building permit, sewer water permit application, you know, development, site development engineering, and it's kind of done together because we're preparing all these drawings together. The drawings that are available to us at this stage are just design drawings, which just speak to the zoning criteria and, you know, a little bit of a site plan and a little bit of, in this case, we went down the road a little bit further, but so it's not customary to do that. So I don't think it's you know, an avenue that's that would be logical to follow or even to set a precedent for, because it kind of puts the cart in front of the horse, in my opinion. But the you know, all this technical stuff requires more detailed drawings that yeah, we just don't really do at this stage, but are prepared to do and will be doing. And so I also think that just with other applications, you know, we always take a risk because we get the variances, but we don't have a building permit yet, and there could be tree issues, and there's always grading issues. Not always, but there's sometimes challenging grading issues. So it's like we just deal with that in the next phase, and that's just how it's done. It's never guaranteed that we're going to get a building permit. Getting these variances approved never, you know, assumes we're going to get a building permit. So, you know, the zoning bylaw.
My question, Mr. Kieran, and I asked my questions about this specific application, not about other applications, and about the ability to be able to assign a process differently. But I do appreciate your thoughts, but that wasn't really what I was asking you. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I'll ask Mr. Kieran, but maybe it's a question from Ms. Parker. Are you going to be required, does the town have the ability, the way the acts are changing these days, to require you to go through the site alteration process? Maybe that's a question from Ms. Parker.
Sorry, were you asking me?
If you can answer it, or Ms. Parker, if it's more appropriate.
I'll give it a shot. Can you just repeat it, please?
Does the town have the ability to make you go through the site alteration permit process with this application?
Yes, it's our understanding, as per recent, because the process has changed slightly over the last year, but now, as of right now, we've been told that all our applications, which is infill residential, will require a site alteration permit. So we are preparing for that, and that's the case with all our projects on the go, remnant channel or not, even ones that aren't are going for site alt. So it's yes, and I have, you know, in communications from the town that I'm basing that on.
Okay, so Ms. Parker, it seems like it's another classic chicken and egg situation. We run into this with site plans, we run into it with heritage approvals. Somebody's got to get an approval first, and then there's other approvals to follow. Staff on a number of occasions have recommended approval with conditions subject to development proceeding in accordance with the final site plan approval or the final heritage approval. Would it not be appropriate if the committee were inclined to approve the variance to add a condition that the development proceed in accordance with the final site alteration permit? And if they don't get it, then they can't build the house. If they get it, that means they've satisfied the concerns raised tonight, and they don't have to then turn around and come back to the committee.
Through Mr. Chair, if it goes to a building permit, they do a screening, and it generally is flagged to require a site alt, but it might be a site plan depending on, we are transitioning right now. So depending on when it came in, it might be a site alt, it might be a site plan. I'll let Ms. McKnight speak to the conditions. I'm not certain of what conditions you can attach if it's not related to the actual variance, right?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. In this scenario, staff have concern with imposing a condition in this case, as it should be possible for any condition imposed to be satisfied. By conditioning it, that's acknowledging that it is reasonable to satisfy. And in this scenario, staff aren't certain that the condition is fulfillable, that a site alt permit will be issued. And so that is why we have hesitated from approaching that condition in this stage, because we're hesitant on whether it will hold weight or not, as we're hesitant on whether it could actually be satisfied. There is a chance that in this scenario that town staff could state there is not a possibility the proposed dwelling could be developed. I'm not stating that that will be the outcome, but it is a possibility.
How does approving a floor area ratio variance prejudice the site alteration process? This is where I'm struggling. How, if the variance gets approved, the applicant still needs a building permit and still needs a site alteration permit. If we don't approve it and they comply with the bylaw, they still need the same approvals.
Through you, Mr. Chair, attaching a condition to a process that we're not sure we can come to a viable solution with is problematic. Because it's agreeing to go through a process to get to a solution that we don't know that we can get to.
How is this different when staff requests conditions subject to heritage approval or subject to site plan approval? It's a different process.
For you, Mr. Chair, it is a different process, and in all cases, the expectation is that you will work through that process to some kind of approval. So that's why staff were hesitant to attach that condition in this case. But should the applicant apply for a building permit, it would be subject to either a site alt or a site plan through that process.
Ms. Hughes, your hand's still up or up again?
I'm up again, thanks.
Okay, please go ahead.
I do want to ask a question to Ms. Karen. So I recall you mentioned that the engineer was preparing the stormwater management report. I want to know how far it is close to the being finalized to be reviewed by the town staff.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chairman, a full stormwater management report was done. It sounds like there was a few things that were missing or maybe needed amending based on what Ms. Parker said, which is not unusual, and we're prepared to deal with that. So a full report has been done, but we expect more work is needed to obviously bring it to the point of approval. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. The reason I answered that question is I noticed that the last submission to the Committee of Adjustment was last November. So I just want to know how close it is to the approval and see what options we have in our hands right now for this file.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, I mean, I don't know exactly what that process will look like, and that's the point of what I'm saying is that I don't think we need to deal with the technical nature of that discussion right now. We can have that, through the site alteration permit process.
Mr. Dickey, you had another comment?
Yeah, I'm going to be going around in circles here. To tell you the truth, I was prepared to put forth a motion, but wanting to put some condition on it that somehow address the flooding issue. But Ms. McKnight and Ms. Parker seem to be telling us the town doesn't want a condition. If we don't put a condition on it, we just go and say we approve it subject that the house be built in accordance with the site plans or the site plans and elevations dated a certain amount. But those plans are going to change. So what happens the next step? I'm not sure, but what happens the next step? They come around, the owners have to turn around and change their plans. They have to come back to the Committee of Adjustment because we said there was a condition that the house be built in accordance with the plans of a certain date. Otherwise, I would make a motion to say remove that condition too. Just say yes to them. So you've got to give us something to go on here.
Well, Mr. Dickey, if you were inclined to move such a motion, perhaps the middle ground would be to make it in general accordance to the site plan elevations to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. And that way, there's flexibility based on the engineering, if they can satisfy it, and they wouldn't have to come back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Karen, I think we need to cut off this discussion, but I'll give you one last chance.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to say that, the condition isn't really even necessary because the standard obligation is for me to obtain a building permit and a site alteration permit. So through that process, that standard process, that is already giving the town the opportunity to just deny it or to not approve it if they're not satisfied. But, I'm just saying there could be additional wording added that, further strengthens that. But if that's not workable from a wording standpoint from them, then that's fine. But that still leaves the general understanding and the general condition that a permit's needed. And through that, they have that opportunity. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close down discussion. I think we've had as thorough a discussion on this matter as we can have. And I'll look for a motion on the floor and we can have discussion as necessary on the motion. So Mr. Dickey, I'm looking at you, given your comments, but
that's fine. I'll do the motion. I just have a little trouble with what the conditions are going to be, but we can talk about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application or discussion, the site plans, the building elevation, the owner's consultant, discussion, and planning, staff, and engineering input. It's my opinion that the variance is minor in nature and conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application as applied for be approved, subject to some conditions. We'll go with number condition number 2. That's the easy one. That the I just lost it. Sorry. That the plan be lost computers. That the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued to for the proposed construction. And the other condition is that the dwelling be constructed in accordance with site plans and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. That would, subject to revision and comments on that last condition, wording.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. So the motion is to approve, subject to development proceeding in general accordance with site plan and elevations to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, and that a building permit issue within 2 years of the decision. Is there discussion on that motion? Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm struggling quite a bit with this one. I think that the staff concerns that have been identified are legitimate. However, I do believe that the chairman's suggestion of an additional condition, something around the idea of the issuance of a development engineering permit within 2 years, like we would do with a building permit, might be something that would assuage some of my concerns to ensure that the development engineering permit process be engaged in, and if the permit cannot be issued within 2 years, then the minor variance is null and void. I think that would address a lot of the concerns on the floor at this point in time, give an opportunity to engage in the process and move it forward in accordance with the preferred timing of the applicant in terms of the engaging in the later, more detailed processes. So I'm prepared to support this if Mr. Dickey were to accept a friendly amendment to include an additional condition.
And that condition would be that a site alteration permit issue within 2 years of the approval?
Thank you for giving me the appropriate wording for that, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Mr. Dickey, are you willing to accept that friendly amendment?
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Okay.
Accept that.
This is a difficult one. As I said, I'm seeing it largely like other applications that have subsequent processes that aren't necessarily applicable law, and we condition it. I struggle greatly with denying an application on basis of concerns that have nothing to do with the actual variance being proposed. I can find that with the variance itself and the design of this house, that the application does meet the 4 tests. And I don't believe it should be denied or deferred further. I think with the conditions, it recognizes that the variance is appropriate provided the applicant can satisfy the other town processes, and I don't think approving a floor area variance in any way prejudices or that the other processes or somehow can be read as, well, we have to approve, give it a building permit and approve a site alt because they got a variance. I don't believe that to be the case whatsoever. So I'm prepared to support Mr. Dickey's motion as well. Ms. Yu, do you have any comments before we close discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have additional comments.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close the discussion. The motion on the floor is to approve the minor variance, finding it meets the test of the Planning Act, subject to the 3 conditions that development proceed in general accordance with site plan and elevations, the satisfaction of the director of planning, that a building permit issue within 2 years of the decision, and that a site alteration permit be issued within 2 years of the decision. All those in favor of the motion? That is unanimous. Mr. Kieran, your application is approved.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. And thank you to staff for that lengthy discussion. Okay. Luckily, that is the last application of the evening. Mr. Hardcastle, would you like to, you cannot confirm minutes. You weren't here at the last meeting. As you, thank you for confirming the minutes of March 6th, and we're going to, Mr. Hardcastle, you can adjourn as usual. Thank you. We are adjourned 9:12 p.m.